Hi everyone, welcome to Advanced Applied Management. This is week 2 where we look at concept mapping. In this session we're going to be looking at concept mapping and how you can get some concept mapping practice. So concept mapping, that's your theoretical framework, your model or your diagram of the relationships that your project has. It's a kind of graphic organiser to help you organise and represent your knowledge of the subject. And concept maps begin with a main idea and then branch out to show how that main idea can be broken down into specific topics. This is one of the weakest parts of research projects often, because researchers haven't clearly determined what the concepts involved are and what the relationship is between them. So concept mapping was developed by Joseph Novak at Cornell University in the 1970s, and they're very similar to the work by Tony Buzan on mind maps. But mind maps generally branch from a central idea. Joseph Novak's idea of concept mapping may not necessarily branch from a central idea. How you do it: you start with your main idea, you branch off with key concepts, you add in the extra concepts that are related, you link them, you provide short explanations in the links between the ideas, and then lastly you add the outliers and put cross links between the various topics. There are some benefits to undertaking concept mapping. It helps you brainstorm and generate new ideas and to think about the gaps that you might have in your research questions. It allows you to more clearly communicate your ideas, your thoughts and your information, and understand the links between the ideas that you're exploring. It also helps you integrate new concepts with older concepts that you already have, and it helps you gain an enhanced knowledge of any topic and to be able to better evaluate the information that you have and to think about the scope of your idea. How you build a concept map? Well, they're typically hierarchical, so the subordinate concepts stem from the main idea. There are some graphic organisers that you can use to put these together. You can find some free ones on the web. The main thing is to remember that the current positions in your map can change and you may need to add things in. Most of the ideas will still keep the same relationship with the other ideas on the map. So I've got a concept map example here from Novak's earlier work. Sorry, it's missing a little bit off the bottom. This is a teacher's expertise of the phases of the moon. He is saying that in actual fact teachers have a very rich understanding of how these concepts interrelate, and this shows this quite clearly.
Concepts are building blocks, the things that you put together that actually make up the scope of your particular question area or your research area. A conceptual framework is a theoretical framework or a model in academic contexts, which we are, or a verbal or a diagrammatic representation of the possible relationship between concepts. Now, I'm actually going to show you an example of a diagrammatic representation on the next slide. So this is from Veal, How to Devise a Conceptual Framework. So he starts with identifying concepts. Then we can operationalize the concepts if we know what they are. First, we identify the concepts that are within the scope of our research project. Secondly, we then operationalize the concept. So we think about how we're going to find that particular piece of information out. Is it within the scope of our research or is it outside the scope of our research? What other kinds of data might come with operationalizing that particular aspect of the concepts? We then explore the relationship between all the concepts. And then lastly, we define the concept so we know exactly what each concept is and how they relate to the others. So we've got a staff turnover project example from Veal. So we're in considering that idea of the human resources turnover, we might start in our concept mapping might be very simplistic. We might think, yep, it depends on the person's personal characteristics, what their expectations were of the job before they went into it, and then what the characteristics of the job are when they get into it, and that leads to turnover. However, when we read some more and we start to realise that it's probably not quite that simple, we can then move on to this aspect of considering, okay, well, we've still got personal characteristics and expectations and job characteristics, but actually there's another couple of steps in here. Those things together add up to job satisfaction, which leads to organisational commitment, which then leads to turnover. And then as we go further along our research project process, we might find that in actual fact that was still quite naive, and what we end up with is our job characteristics and our pre-employment expectations are actually linked, that they come together before job satisfaction, and that the job characteristics depend on the type of industry we're in, the job level we have, our salary, how involved we are in decisions, and the size of our organisation. Equally, our personal characteristics were not quite that simple either. We need to be able to evaluate how good our self-esteem is, our gender, our age, our education, our experience, and so on. Because in actual fact, when we look at the data across those things, if we can filter for those, we will find that there are different characteristics that come into play for job satisfaction. Say, if we're married, we may put up with more because we're relying more on this wage to feed our family. Then again, when we come down to job satisfaction, if we look further, there's an extra step beyond organisational commitment that we hadn't identified earlier, and that is this aspect of intention to leave, which then adds to turnover. So you can see that as you go on, you start with a fairly simple model and it becomes more complex as time goes on, and that is a normal part of the research as we come to know our data better.